is just not good. So anyway, let's go ahead. I think this is good timing, and let's go ahead and begin the webinar. Great to have everybody here. I'm so fortunate here to be here today with Christine Coward, who is the lead health coach, and with Julie G., who is a citizen scientist and who has done so much, and you'll hear from both of them about their areas of expertise in just a few minutes. Julie, welcome. Christine, welcome.
Yeah, thanks. We're psyched to be here with you, Dale.
Absolutely.
Great. Things are really changing. I think this is an exciting time. You know, we're just setting up this randomized controlled trial, the follow-up to the trial that we'll talk about today, where we have all the results back. And there's so much new. There are epigenetics that weren't available just a few years ago. There is phospho-tau 181 and phospho-tau 217, two different measurements, which really reflects now, fortunately, in your blood work, can reflect damage to neural structures. So that's very helpful. Also, people are looking at GFAP, another marker, and a neurofilament light, which is a fourth marker. Those latter two aren't quite as specific for Alzheimer's, but they are quite sensitive. So increase in things like traumatic brain injury and stuff like that. So lots to talk about. And I should say, you know, A-beta is another one. So lots of things that weren't available just a few years ago. And so I think very interesting to talk about what we actually saw on this trial. So what we're going to discuss today is first the state of Alzheimer's treatment and the controversy. I mean, everyone I think has been seeing all over the internet, all over the various news shows, the report of a suspected fraud. This is both from Cassava Sciences, which is now going to be evaluated by the DOJ, and also from a specific couple of laboratories at University of Minnesota. And this is related to earlier publications, and unfortunately in one lab's case, multiple publications related to, again, amyloid. So many people trying to put a square peg in a round hole and show that amyloid, and this, of course, a year ago came up with Aduhelm. So we're going to talk about the state of Alzheimer's treatment and controversy. We're going to talk extensively about the peer-reviewed publication, how we did it, what it means, why it is really the first good news for turning things around. And in fact, of course, we have people now who've been doing for more than 10 years, who've been doing this approach with sustained improvement, which is wonderful. We're really getting to a point where if everyone does the right thing early enough, Alzheimer's is becoming optional. Then we're going to talk about ReCODE 2.0 training for practitioners and health coaches, and Christine's going to talk about health coaching and really the importance. This is arguably the most important interaction that each person has, because it often makes the difference between success and failure with reversal and sustained reversal of cognitive decline. Then we're going to talk a little bit about ReCODE and pre-code, and everyone, by the way, can get freely start with CQ. Find out where you stand. We've had a lot of people who say, you know, I really think about prevention. Well, when they actually check their cognition, they've already began to slide. This does sneak up on you. There's no question. It's more clear than ever with the brain fog associated with long COVID. So many of us who had COVID have had some brain fog with the COVID. And then finally, we'll do some Q&A at the end. So let's go to the next one here. And so I just want to start, though, by mentioning one thing, because I think it's so important. And because, you know, we get so confused by everything that's out there in the media. And so when people talk about success, here's what they mean. A year ago, they were talking about success with aducanumab. And you can see what that means. If you have no treatment and you have mild cognitive impairment or you have Alzheimer's disease, on average, you lose about 3.4 points on a 30-point scale. That's like MoCA or MMSE on average per year. Now, aducanumab didn't make people better. It didn't stabilize them. What it did was, in its best case, which is what we're showing here, it slowed the decline by 22%. That's all it did. Donanemab, which is not yet available except in trials, slowed the decline by 32%. And in contrast, what we'll show you today with the trial actually improved people. It didn't just slow their decline, it improved people. So we're very excited about that. And if you go to the next one here, then, so the other key piece here is that we've all been hurt by the whole nomenclature of mild cognitive impairment. So when you tell someone they have mild cognitive impairment, or if you go to your physician and he or she says, don't worry, you just have mild cognitive impairment, that's like someone telling you, don't worry, you only have mildly metastatic cancer. Unfortunately, it is a relatively late stage in Alzheimer's disease, which really begins 20 years before a diagnosis. So we go through 4 stages. First one here is when you're asymptomatic. You can already find abnormalities on spinal fluid and PET scans, and you can see those people into their early 40s, 30s, and sometimes even into their 20s. So you can pick it up then, but you don't have symptoms at that time. Now, that goes along for a few years. Then you go to the second phase, which is called SCI. And the epidemiologists have shown us that lasts on average 10 years. So you have during that time a subjective cognitive impairment. And of course, your partner says, oh, you're just getting a little older. And your doctor may say, oh, you're just getting a little older, because you're still able to score within the normal range on cognitive tests. But you know there's something wrong, and everyone knows there's something wrong, that you're interacting with them. That's when we really want to, in those phase 1 and phase 2, is when we want to jump on this, because virtually 100% of people do great. Now, if you don't do anything during that time, you go on to MCI, mild cognitive impairment. This is where now you are not doing normally on cognitive testing, but you still can do your activities of daily living. 5% to 10% of those people convert each year to full-on dementia. And by definition, then, when you go to phase 4, which is the dementia phase, your activities of daily living are affected. You may have trouble doing your checkbooks. You may have trouble doing a tip. You may have trouble doing your bills, have trouble taking care of yourself, bathing, all these sorts of things that you begin to lose. Now, that, as you can see, that is an end stage of a process that's now been going on for 20 plus years. So if you go to the next one, let's do why things are the way they are. We really are, I have to say, we keep hearing one after the other of these absolute horror stories. And the one I heard just a couple of days ago was from 2 physicians married, and the husband said, things aren't quite right. The wife said, yeah, you're not doing as well as you used to. They went in, and he's in his now early 70s, went into his neurologist, who said, oh, you're just getting a little older. He ended up scoring on the MoCA an 18. So this guy already was past phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and already had now dementia, but was being told by his neurologist that this is just normal aging. And it turned out on his scans, he actually ended up having some hydrocephalus. So we cannot miss these things. If we can get everybody to come in these early phases, virtually nobody should get dementia. So the reason it's a sad state of affairs, physicians tell their patients to wait, say, it's probably not Alzheimer's. And by the way, if it is, there's not much we can do. They treat people very late, which is the opposite of what you want to do. They use small data sets. So they say, okay, we're going to look at your B12 and your thyroid. We're not going to look at your homocysteine. We're not going to look at your genetics. We're not going to look at all these other things, because either they don't think that anything can be done, or because they don't know how to interpret those things. But it's critical, as you'll see, to know all these different things. And then they adhere to the outdated claim, there's nothing you can do to reverse, to prevent, or to delay Alzheimer's. And this is a common refrain from multiple foundations, et cetera. And as we've shown, and as I'll show you with the results from our trial, nothing could be further from the truth. And then the families of nursing home patients, they're not urged to begin prevention. Everybody, when there's someone in a nursing home, everybody from that family who is 45 years of age or older should be on active prevention. Let's at least end it with that generation. And by the way, we have wonderful results from a number of nursing homes, and especially Marama down in San Diego, which is doing this protocol that we used for the trial that you'll see today. And getting fantastic results. So we're grateful to Dr. Heather Sanderson and all the great work that she's done to help her patients there. And I look for this as being the role model for many, many assisted living facilities around the country. And here's a statistic that is really frightening. Patients spend an average of $350,000 before dying of Alzheimer's, leaving many patients and their families destitute. And I got an email after we mentioned this the first time from a woman who said, no, on my mother, we spent over $1 million. Nursing home bills, unfortunately, very high and continue year after year after year. So it's really unfortunate. We'd like to prevent. You can do much, much better financially as well by getting in early, doing the right things, and not having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to make sure that people are okay. And then, of course, this really naive insistence that we have to test one drug after one drug after one drug because one of these is going to be the cure for Alzheimer's. And as you'll see today, that's not the way this disease works. And our research over 30 years in the lab showed that this is a network insufficiency. It's a whole network. And so it's just like saying, you know, if your large company with 1,000 employees is doing poorly, are you going to hire one new receptionist that's going to turn that around? No, that's not the way it works. And so despite the fact that there are published data showing that we can improve by looking at more of these things, people haven't really awakened to that yet. So if you go to the next one here. So we want to improve the system. We want to make Alzheimer's a rare disease. I think that's a goal for all of us. It would be great to have a world that has a much lower burden of dementia. So everyone who's 45 or over should have a cognoscopy. Again, it's free. Go take the CQ test, see where you stand, get on active prevention or reversal, or if you're having symptoms, get on reversal. And you can go to the next one here. And then yeah, we go. Okay. And then we want to use a multi-tiered approach. Of course, you don't want to do a big workup for everybody who's at the beginning stages. So great. It works very well. Everybody does the basics, gets on active prevention. A few of those people will then fall through the cracks, especially the ones that aren't doing the active prevention. They will need a little more substantial evaluation. They will then need a little more active treatment because now they've got symptoms or changes. Now, the next group, smaller group, a few of those will fall through, and so forth and so on, until there will be a couple where you really have to do a full court press that includes stem cells. But of course, it's much less expensive to start earlier. We want to prevent and treat in these first two phases when people are pre-symptomatic or if they have SCI. Don't wait until it's very late. And then we want to get larger data sets and computer-based algorithms, which is why we've been so interested in what Apollo is doing with developing these computer-based algorithms so that we can get better and better and better outcomes. And of course, more data to tell us where to go next. How do we keep tweaking this to make it better and better? So we want to combine a personalized precision medicine protocol with targeted pharmaceuticals. In the long run, sure, some of these drugs are going to be helpful, but they're not working when you simply are using them as monopharmaceuticals. It just doesn't work. Public health measures, such as building with dry wood. People who are building their homes with wet wood are getting, of course, exposure to molds and mycotoxins. Minimizing processed food, and Professor Robert Lustig has written elegantly about this over the years, as has Julie. Minimizing the processed food, reducing exposure to air pollution. There's more and more evidence that air pollution is an important risk factor in cognitive decline. Avoiding pesticides, et cetera, to reducing dementia exposure. The reality is there's a tremendous amount that can be done on the public health side, as well as on the practitioner side and on the personal side to reduce your risk and to help reverse any decline that has occurred. Okay, next. So there are a lot of theories of Alzheimer's, and this is actually what I was interested in for my whole career. We spent many, many years and published over 220 papers looking at what is Alzheimer's? What is the most fundamental nature of this problem? And so we studied what is the signaling involved with cell death. And as you can see here, all sorts of theories. The surprise is that there's a little bit of supportive data for every single one of these theories. That tells you something right there. If it were a simple disease, all the data would be around one theory and all the other ones would be wrong. But all of these theories have a little bit of supportive data. None of them, not a single one of these current theories has led to successful treatment. And that's the take-home message here. And if you go to the next, So let's go under the hood and let's look at how this disease actually works. And it tells you what it actually is. So here is amyloid precursor protein. You can see here it sits in your cells. The amino terminus is outside here, is outside the cell. So this is called a type 1 transmembrane protein. And you can see it's just got a little tail inside the cell. A lot of this is in neurons, most of it. And in fact, especially high levels near synapses. No big surprise. So this thing is a master switch. When things are good, then this thing actually is cut at a single site, which produces 2 different peptides. So you'll see here that there you go. So it's cut here, and now you'll see SAPP alpha and CTF alpha. And by the way, a paper just came out, said, oh, here's a new way to treat Alzheimer's, SAPP alpha. Let's give people that. Yes, we've been saying that for over 10 years. So the point of this here is you have SAPP alpha, which is supportive and telling other cells, we're going to make new synapses, we're going to keep synapses, we're going to make new memories, we're going to have positive neuroplasticity. And alpha CTF is actually going inside the cell and saying the same thing. So it's coordinating inside with outside, saying, we have enough hormones, we have enough nutrients, we have enough growth factors, we don't have too much inflammation, we've got enough energy, oxygenation, mitochondrial function, blood flow, things are good, we're good to go. No different than what you do in your country. This is like my Bredesen here. So on the other hand, when things are bad, very much like what happened to our country in the pandemic, early 2020, we were all told to isolate, social distancing, et cetera. And if you go to this next here, it'll show you what happens. It gets cleaved. So this same molecule switches into a protective downsizing mode. It is making things that actually kill microbes. The amyloid that we have vilified here, this thing that says A beta, you can see this fragment, we have vilified in Alzheimer's, is really something that is protecting your brain. And yes, it's downsizing as well, but it is a protective downsizing. It is literally coating viruses, coating bacteria, coating fungi, coating spirochetes, and literally killing them. So now you go into a completely different scenario. You are now downsizing. You're now not able to make those memories. So now we want to know all the things that drive you in the good direction and the bad direction. For each person, we can measure that, and we can drive you toward the left side here of the slide, the SAPP alpha, and away from the SAPP beta. And that's what has worked repeatedly to get best outcomes. So if you go to the next one then. So major contributors, and if you hit that, so I apologize for the math slide here, but the simple point of this is your probability of getting Alzheimer's is proportional to basically a set of 4 groups of things. Inflammatory mediators. So if you got ongoing inflammation, you're increasing your risk. And that can be from pathogens, leaky gut, poor oral microbiome, metabolic syndrome, what have you, chronic sinusitis, you name it. Or if you have toxins, and those can be the air pollution I mentioned earlier, mercury, organics, biotoxins, things like trichothecenes and ochratoxin A and gliotoxin. So those toxins also, they're putting a greater drag on this system. This is all about supply versus demand. And on the other hand, if you have too low on the energetics, blood flow, oxygenation, mitochondrial function, and ketones, or trophic support, and that's hormones, nutrients, and growth factors, then in fact, you're at increased risk. So we want to increase your energetics and your trophic support. We want to decrease the inflammatory mediators and the toxins, not just get rid of inflammation, but determine what actually caused it, so that we can now change your neurochemistry toward a productive, toward a positive, so that you are now once again able to make and store synapses. And this predicts beautifully what works, what doesn't work. So if you go to the next one, there. So of course, as you can see immediately, because there are these different factors, Some people have mostly one factor, some people have mostly different ones. So there's type 1, which is inflammatory from things like infections, and type 2, which is atrophic. These people look different. They tend to be, the atrophic people tend to be older. They're low on their hormones, they're low on their nutrients, but they don't have a lot of inflammation. So they just can't support that big nervous system. You have almost a quadrillion synapses in your brain. They cannot support that, so they downsize. Third is glycotoxic, and we call it type 1.5 because it's got some inflammation, and that's from the glycation of the proteins. But then it's also got an atrophic piece to it because you're insulin resistant. So your insulin doesn't help the way it's supposed to. Then we have type 3, which is toxic, as I mentioned earlier. Type 4, which is vascular. There are many people that have mostly a vascular problem. Again, we need to make sure the blood flow is there, the oxygenation is there, et cetera. And then type 5, which is traumatic. And I should mention there was a famous paper in the mid-1980s from Dr. Gareth Roberts, who showed that people who had a lot of head trauma from traffic accidents accumulated a tremendous amount of amyloid in their brains, literally within the next 7 to 10 days. So it is an early response also, again, as you're basically trying to rewire with all the damage in the nervous system. Go to the next one. And then you see here, so we're going to talk for just a couple of minutes about the trial here. And I'm really honored to have done this with Dr. Anne Hathaway, Dr. Kat Toops, and Dr. Deborah Gordon. It's the first trial. Instead of predetermining a treatment, which if you think about it really makes no sense, we're actually looking at what's causing the problem and then addressing that. And then you go to the next one here. So we were denied 2011 and 2018 again. So we did a lot of actually background work. And finally, in 2019, it was approved. It's a small proof of concept trial. You can read about it now. It's in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease. It's been published. And also there's some press releases around it in various newspapers, et cetera. So 25 patients. Now, these patients were in that third and fourth stage. Of course, it would be even easier if they were in the first two stages, but we purposefully took them in the MCI or early dementia stage. And why did we do that? Because that's the same stage that aducanumab took their patients. So we wanted to show, whereas that didn't help, we wanted to show that, in fact, we can help a lot. And so we compared the personalized precision medicine protocol to just historical outcomes. We know what happens to these patients. There's a tremendous amount written about them. They go downhill, as we know. So we looked at all the different root causes, and then we addressed those specific causes. Let's talk about how we evaluated them and what the outcomes was. So we used the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, 0, 3, 6, and 9 months. If you go to the next one here, we also used a more sensitive online test, CNS vital signs, which is great because it then gives us a larger dynamic range. We can look at people who are less impaired and more impaired. Then we use the AQ21, which is where their partners will say, hey, they've had this problem or they've had that problem. And then you go to the next one, we use something called the AQ20, which is a change scale, which was actually created by QuestGen. It's just an estimate of, did these people get better or worse? Then we looked at MRIs at the beginning and end. Did their MRIs get worse? People with MCI or Alzheimer's have MRIs that we know how quickly they get worse, and they virtually always get worse. And if you go to the next one, and first thing was we looked at their metabolic changes. As you can see here, everything improved, and everything was statistically significant in its improvement, except the trend we saw in HOMA-IR. We simply didn't have enough HOMA-IRs at the end stage on several of the patients. But there, even with what we had, there was a trend. So everything improved metabolically. And then if you go to the next one, did that associate with cognitive testing? And the answer was yes, it did. And if you go through here, so this just shows that as they went along, they improved at 3 months, more improvement at 6 months, and still more improvement at 9 months. We had a few drop off at 9 months because the pandemic hit right there between the 6 and the 9 months. So no surprise, a few people stopped doing the right thing and actually fell off a bit. But overall, as a group, they still did better than the 6 months. So they continued to improve, which is, again, unheard of in Alzheimer's trials. And then you can see here, 84% of these people improved, 4% of them were stable, 12% declined. And the few that declined, in fact, typically you could see why. One person had a lot of mycotoxins in her home and said, I'm not leaving, I'm not remediating my home, I'm just going to stay here. No surprise, she continued to decline. And if you go to the next one, so it is important to address the things that are causing this. If you look at their gray matter volume, Here, the former versus the new, they actually improved. This is from one specific patient who actually was not in this trial. But if you look at the gray matter, you can see the gray matter here is largely in this cortical ribbon that's being traced around here. And the computer will actually go through here painstakingly and figure out. So the gray matter improved in these people. And the hippocampal volume, which you can see here, there's the hippocampal volume there, in these patients in the trial, had a minimal change. It actually was slightly smaller in the trial, but less so than normal aging and much less so than other people who had MCI or Alzheimer's. So by all of these criteria, these people did very, very well. And if you go to the next one, so if you just go through MoCA test, neurocognitive index, cognitive subtests, AQ20 change scale, brain HQ, MRI, hippocampal volume, everything in here was better. If you go to the next one, there we go. So we published a number of papers. And if you look at this third one here, this is the one, that one there, yeah. So this one just came out in Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, a peer-reviewed journal, a very good journal for studies of Alzheimer's disease. And now we're on to a larger randomized controlled trial, which is just starting in the next couple of months. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be able to use things like epigenetics and phospho-tau and things that weren't available even a couple of years ago. And if you go to the next one, and this, of course, you'll see about this in the books. And this one here in the middle, Julie wrote extensively about the approach, all the things that you actually need to do to make this work as someone who's done exceedingly well herself. And if you go to the next one here, and you hit there we go. So the bottom line is we are exiting the era in which Alzheimer's disease is an inevitability for so many people. It's going to become a former scourge. And so the most important thing here is let's spend a few minutes now talking about what are the critical things to get started. And there's nobody better than Julie Gregory to talk about this. She's just been amazing. As I mentioned, wrote a significant part of that second book and has been practicing this herself and really getting started on her own before we even came out with our first paper over 10 years ago. And so, Julie, thank you so much for joining us. And please talk about these various basics and how to do this in the best ways possible.
Absolutely. Before I get started, I want to apologize. I woke up today with what I hope is a summer cold. So my voice is very scratchy and I have a little runny nose, so apologies. As Dr. Bredesen mentioned, I have personally been on the protocol for 10 years now. And this approach gave me hope when mainstream medicine really had nothing to offer. I began experiencing symptoms 10 years ago when I was age 50. And around that same time, I learned I carried 2 copies of the ApoE4 allele, which greatly predisposes me genetically to developing Alzheimer's disease. So I turned to the Alzheimer's Association because I thought, well, there must be something I can do. They told me Alzheimer's can't be prevented, that it was untreatable. They went on to say it was incurable, it was progressive and fatal. So as you can imagine, I was already exhibiting symptoms. I knew I was at high genetic risk, so I was terrified. I finally got up the courage to see my own neurologist. And when I asked him what I could do to heal, because I thought the Alzheimer's Association must be wrong, he told me, good luck with that. That's all that he had to say. But I refused to believe that. And I put every fiber of my being into healing. And after following the principles of this protocol, within 1 year, I reversed my cognitive decline. So my testing started in the mid 35th percentile, mid 30th percentile, and I got to the mid 90th percentile. And as Dr. Bredesen has said, I've sustained that for 10 years now. So I know this protocol works, and I'm very excited to be sharing it with you today. And I know some of you out there are wondering, what can I do today to protect my cognition? And that's what I want to talk with you about. So I'm going to introduce you to the Bredesen Seven, or the B7. And these are the 7 strategies that are foundational for healing. The B7 is not a substitute for the protocol. You still have to identify and address whatever is contributing to your cognitive decline or emerging cognitive decline. But these are the foundational ways in which we do that. All of these 7 strategies promote neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to heal following trauma in response to stimuli. And the stimuli in this case is each of these strategies. And when you put them all together, a very powerful synergy occurs. Researchers used to say that we couldn't grow new synaptic connections. We couldn't grow new neurons. We now know that we can, and we can do this even into old age. And by following these 7 strategies, this is how you do it. You may have noticed that the wheel is on a base of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the ability to be fully present in a non-judgmental manner. And we've learned that when participants follow these strategies in a mindful way, they become easier to implement and more sustainable. The opposite of mindfulness is when you go into autopilot, and that's when we tend to make less healthy decisions. And what I'm going to do is go through each of these strategies in order of importance, and I'm going to give you a broad overview of each. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to start with nutrition. This is by far the most impactful of all of the strategies. The approach that we use, it upregulates metabolic health to optimally fuel the brain. It's anti-inflammatory, and it also is detoxifying, and it's very highly nutrient dense. We call the approach Keto Flex 12-3. It's heavily based, mildly ketogenic diet. We prioritize lots of non-starchy vegetables from every color of the rainbow, preferably organic, seasonal, and local. An adequate amount of clean protein, and that can be animal protein or plant protein, and generous amounts of healthy fat. And we like to call it the Keto Flex 12-3 lifestyle because it's more than what you eat, it's when you eat. We combine this eating plan with a minimum 12-hour daily fast, of which at least 3 hours will occur before bed to promote the cellular cleaning process called autophagy. And in the chat, we're going to share a link to Keto Flex 12-3 so that you can take a deeper dive into it, because we could spend this entire hour talking about this alone. Let's go to the next slide. Our second most important strategy is exercise. There is a tremendous amount of research showing that exercise is very important for cognitive health. Different forms of exercise exert different mechanisms. And before I begin to share our recommendations, if you're sedentary now, in any exercise regimen, the first thing that we like to recommend is that you increase movement throughout the day. We're now learning that if you're sedentary all day long, and I have a desk job and I'm sitting most of the day, so I get this, one dedicated exercise session is not enough. You need to increase movement throughout the day. So I'm lucky enough to work from home, and I take 5 or 10 minutes out of every hour, and I begin doing chores. I'll pull weeds, I'll vacuum, I'll switch laundry. I'm looking for opportunities to move. Research shows that lots of daily movement throughout the day increases brain volumetrics, leading to a younger brain. So that's first and foremost. Then there's 3 different types of exercise that we like to recommend. The first is aerobic exercise. Aerobic exercise increases blood flow to the brain. It also upregulates the brain derived neurotrophic factor, which is like fertilizer for the brain. We like to recommend a minimum 30 minutes. And for some of you who don't exercise regularly, that might be something you have to work up to. It doesn't have to be a walk, but that's a super simple way to get in your aerobic exercise. We like everyone to walk with a purpose, as if you were late to an appointment. I intersperse my walk with periods of running. And whenever possible, do your aerobic exercise outside, because spending time in nature has additional healing benefits. The second type of exercise training that we want to recommend is strength training. It's very important because it improves metabolic health. It increases insulin sensitivity, which helps your brain get the fuel it needs. It also protects against muscle and bone loss. We recommend strength training 3 to 4 times a week. So I like to do it every other day. So I give my muscles a chance to recover in between each session. And finally, we've just added this to the protocol. We're asking everyone to consider doing a mind-body practice. Research is showing that when you combine this cognitive element with physical athleticism, as with ballroom dancing or Pilates or even yoga, there's this powerful synergy that occurs and you get added benefits. At Apollo Health, we have a weekly yoga class that we offer our participants that's led by our principal research scientist, Dr. Ram Rao, and it's very popular. It's really, really nice. So let's go to the next slide. The next most important strategy is sleep. So memory formation occurs during sleep. And we've recently learned that there's a lymphatic system in your brain that's draining toxins as you sleep. And among the toxins that are cleared out while you're sleeping is beta amyloid. So it's very important to meet your goal of 7 to 8 hours of quality restorative sleep every night. We're also learning that disordered breathing, very often obstructive sleep apnea, can contribute to the development of dementia. Those periods of hypoxia throughout the night can lead to cognitive decline. So we teach our participants how to track that. And if they are found to have disordered breathing, we help them get the appropriate treatment. And finally, we put together an extensive sleep hygiene program to help you meet your goal. You can't just tell someone to get 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep if they're not sleeping well now, but there's many, many things that you can do to control that. So let's go to the next slide. Next up is stress. So we know that chronic acute stress can contribute to the development of cognitive decline. While we can't avoid stress, we can absolutely manage it. And we offer our participants multiple ways that they can do that. One of the most important is to take regular breathing breaks. So we walk them through this special type of breathing, and we ask them to do it for a minute or two, maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the day. And it moves your nervous system to this relaxation response, so that you're just able to physiologically move the body to a relaxed state. We also want everybody to adopt a daily practice of stress management using any strategy that works for you. You can use mindfulness, meditation, meditative movement like yoga that I previously mentioned, or Tai Chi or Qigong. Brain entrainment, which is when you put on some earphones and listen to an audio track that moves your brain waves toward a meditative state, the theta brainwave state. We also like the dynamic neural retraining system that was created by Annie Hopper to calm the limbic system. This is especially helpful for anybody with toxic type 3 Alzheimer's. And finally, we love to use HeartMath to kind of check the progress. It's a type of biofeedback so that you can actually see how effective your stress management is. So let's go ahead to our next slide. Next up is brain stimulation. So a lot of people, as they get older, they look forward to retirement. And what they do when they retire is they sit in this very comfortable reclining chair, and sometimes it vibrates and sometimes it has drink holders, and they eat a lot of junky food and they watch junky TV. And that's the exact opposite of what we want to do as you age. We want you to upsize your brain, not downsize it. So ways you can do this: stay socially active. Maintain a support system. If you were to be in some kind of trouble and need assistance, do you have a few people that you can always count on? Also, nurture your passion, your purpose in life. everybody should be engaging in lifelong learning opportunities. Whatever excites you, take a college class. I know technology presents a wonderful way for us to learn. I took a typewriter to college, so I'm constantly teaching myself how to use different apps and different programs and whatnot. So instead of relying on your children, your grandchildren to help you, try to teach yourself or take a class to learn new things. Look forward to these challenges. We also like to recommend brain training. This was a big part of my recovery. We like Brain HQ by Posit Science. They recommend 90 minutes of brain training a week. A lot of people like to do 3 30-minute sessions. If that's too stressful, you can do daily 12, 13-minute sessions instead. They're broken into small 1 and 2 minute games. And Dale, do you want to talk about other forms of physical stimulation for the brain?
Yeah, and I think a number of practitioners have pointed out that they are getting even improved results when they include things like light stimulation. And of course, Dr. Berman has developed a whole set of helmets for light stimulation. Of course, there's V-Light, which is another one that many people use. Magnetic stimulation, and Dr. Brosfield has shown that MERT, a specific type of magnetic stimulation, can be very helpful. Groups even working on sound. And of course, laser, which Dr. Robert Hedaya has shown very good results with a laser as well, and Dr. Craig Tanio. So these things are all additional stimulations that could be helpful. Now, just like with working out with weights, stimulation without support, without the right nutrients and all the things you've already talked about, doesn't help. But once you've got all your ducks in a row there, then in fact, some form of stimulation can be quite helpful.
Nice, thank you. Can we go to the next slide? Our next strategy is detox or detoxification. And we're living in an increasingly toxic world. And we're really at the beginning of learning how profoundly these toxins are affecting us in terms of cognition. So some things that you can do. Ensure to the best of your ability that the air you're breathing, the water you're drinking, the food you're eating, and any products that touch your skin are as toxin-free as possible. Let's go to the next one. We're also learning that mold and mycotoxins are very important as far as the development of Alzheimer's disease, type 3 toxic Alzheimer's. So we help our participants rule out mold in their environment, in their homes, in their offices, and even in their vehicles. And if mold is found, it needs to be remediated. And next, we encourage our participants to practice good oral hygiene. There's a strong connection between your oral hygiene and your brain health. And we're finding this through mercury amalgams can contribute to cognitive decline, even infected root canals, HSV1, which is the herpes cold sore virus. We want people to be treating that in a very aggressive manner. A lot of people on preventative protocols. And gum disease is another one. So gum disease is very clearly linked to development of Alzheimer's. And there's something you can do. These are all things that you can address. And in our program, we help you with that. Everybody be working on a good, healthy oral microbiome. And finally, we can't avoid toxins. We're going to live with them. So we have to upregulate our ability to detoxify. And we do that by drinking lots of clean filtered water, eating lots of cruciferous vegetables, and sweating, whether that's through exercise or sauna. We need to get the toxins out. Let's go to the next slide. And last but not least, although it is the least important of the B7, is supplements. And we like to say supplements are supplemental. That said, they're very helpful and very important if a specific nutrient deficiency is found. So we like our participants to do extensive laboratory testing so we can find those nutrient deficiencies. We can find biomarkers that are not quite optimal, and we create a personalized supplement protocol for you to address those. So if your B12 is low, if your vitamin D is low, if your homocysteine is high, we put together a supplement regimen that can help. Initially, many people need to take many supplements to optimize their biochemistry, but this can often be reduced as healing occurs. And let's go to our next slide. Now that you've sort of been introduced to the B7, which are the fundamentals of the protocol, I want to invite everybody to assess your cognition today. When I had symptoms of cognitive decline, I was in denial. When I scored in the mid 30th percentile, I would have thought I would have scored in the 75th percentile. And it was only because I had 2 copies of ApoE4 that I took my cognition seriously. Don't be me. Take the cognitive, this free cognitive assessment today. It's called the Cognitive Quotient Assessment. It takes 15 minutes. You need 15 uninterrupted minutes. And you will receive detailed results after you complete that assessment that will direct you to one of our 2 programs, either our pre-code program for prevention or our ReCODE program for reversal. And everybody watching today can check out these programs. We're going to offer you a free 30-day trial so you can see what Apollo Health has to offer you. And you know, what an amazing program this is. I would have given anything to have had these programs when I was suffering with cognitive decline. And it's been my honor to help create these educational materials for you. So please check your cognition today, everyone who's listening. And Chris, who's our lead health coach, is going to talk a little bit to our practitioners and coaches who might be listening.
Yes, thank you. That was beautiful, Julie. I'm sure everyone is thinking, wow, that is a lot to change. And that's where coaching comes in. So there are a lot of behavior changes involved once you know what your path needs to be to reverse or prevent cognitive decline. And that's where we come in here as coaches and practitioners. So if you are a practitioner or coach and have been listening to this webinar or going to listen to the recording, and this work calls you, we have robust training to learn all the ins and outs and the science with our program ReCODE 2.0. There's a variety of experts in the field that have modules that they're presenting on. It's all self-paced. The program is slightly different for practitioners and coaches in that the practitioner training, it's about 40 hours. The coach training is also about 40 hours. And has all of the practitioner material in it. Some of it is considered optional, but if you want to go for it, it's there for you. But we've also added specific modules just for coaches on best practices for coaching run by some really experienced coaches that have been doing this for a while. And with the coach training also, we have a monthly live call for our community of coaches who are either in training and even if they've graduated and are up and running as a ReCODE 2.0 coach, they stay in the community because we go through a lot of best practices and ways to support each other and network and so on. So we do need practitioners and coaches who are trained in almost all geographic areas. There's some where we're really short actually, and we know that we have members who are looking for that support. So sign up if this speaks to you. We'd love to have you go through it. The price is going to go up for this in early 2023. So if it's something you're thinking about or on the fence, doing this before the end of the year is probably a better call economically. And we've just made so many improvements and it justifies the price increase.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much, Julie. So much that can be done. And I challenge everyone here, let's make it so that nobody here today is going to go on to get dementia. It really is something that we can have a tremendous impact on. And even as we showed you in the trials, even reversal of cognitive decline. But of course, the earlier you get in, the more complete and the more likely to get complete improvement. So there's some excellent questions here. First one here is from Anne. Says, what about using Qigong and movement to increase focus in infrared shaded sunlight to feed mitochondria? Absolutely. And of course, the sunlight falls into what Julie was just talking about with light stimulation. Good for all of us. And of course, you probably heard recently that some red light stimulation has been helpful for patients who have age-associated either macular degeneration or visual decline for other reasons. And in fact, we've now evaluated our first couple of patients with early macular degeneration with a variation on what we've used for cognitive decline, of course, addressing those genetics and those and that biochemistry, and seen clear improvement and documented improvement. So we're very excited about that. Next one here is, and of course, Qigong, the same sort of thing. In this case, Julie talked about all the mindfulness and yoga and things like that. And good person to talk to would be Dr. Ramahan Rao, who is both an Ayurvedic physician and a researcher, and has written a book all about best practices to get optimal brain health. And then, whoops, I think we lost one here. We need to add back that question that just disappeared here. All right, next one is from Nina, who said, I was just scored MoCA as a 29. I realize that's not terrible, but I'm here because I've sensed a real change in my memory. How far along am I on the phase scale, and should I be worried? So this is such a good point, and I'm so glad you brought it up, Nina. This is a critical point, and this is the future for all of us. Don't wait. The old idea was we're going to wait and wait and wait as long as we can. And so, yes, and I see hers has just disappeared. So yeah, we need to leave these on here a little longer if possible. So here's the thing. First of all, I would do CNS vital signs, because that is something that's more sensitive. This is why in the trial, we did have some people who had MoCAs of 28, 29, even a few with 30, but they clearly had complaints, changes. And so when you look at the CNS vital signs, that was able to be sensitive enough to show that, yes, things have changed. You are the best indicator, you're the best judge of when things changed. So you most likely have SCI, subjective cognitive impairment, because you are, by definition, you're still scoring in the normal range. But for you, it may not be scoring in the normal range. You might have come, and we had one person years ago who was the math champion of his state, and this person had gotten all the way to the fourth stage of having dementia. And his wife took him in, but he still scored in the 50th percentile on his cognitive test. So the psychologist said, oh, you're fine. You're scored in the 50th percentile. She said, are you out of your mind? No, this person has had so much decline. So I'm glad you mentioned this. And yes, please get evaluated. I would certainly take the CQ and see where you stand, because that is a more sensitive test than just this. And then get on active prevention. If you have SCI, it'll be actually reversal instead of prevention. But with SCI patients, we see virtually 100% of them get back. And we had one a few years ago who actually was farther than that, had MCI, but came in for prevention and said, it's in my family. I'm ApoE4 positive, but I think I'm here mainly for prevention. She scored a 23 on the MoCA. So she was someone who was actually quite far along in that third stage already. After the trial, just getting on the protocol, she scored a 30, and she's done very, very well. So that's what you want to do. Next one here is from Susan. What about COVID brain fog? Yes, this has been such a common issue. And I'm looking at a book being all about brain fog, because this is such a common problem now, and it's a huge issue with COVID-19 and with younger people often, and with long COVID. So Julie and Chris, what have you recommended to people you've worked with who are having brain fog?
I absolutely recommend our program. What's good for the brain is good for the brain. We need to nurture and support it, especially when you're experiencing cognitive symptoms following COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have anything different than that to add. The brain is the brain, right? Yeah.
And Chris, I know you've got groups, you've got a group on toxicity, for example. Would you ever consider a group on brain fog?
That's a really interesting idea. Yeah, we have so many different support and education groups running now. And as we realize we need to have almost specialty topics in certain areas, that is a good one, because that might interest younger people too, who are having these impacts from COVID.
Absolutely. So we recommend anyone who's had COVID, please get on ReCODE, active prevention. Anyone who has symptoms for cognitive change, people who have long COVID and who have brain fog, please get on ReCODE, on reversal of cognitive decline, so that you can actually do much better. So that's a really important point. Let's make it so that people don't have cognitive decline. Next one here is from Bonnie. She says, I've been an A4 clinical trial participant. So this is the use of an antibody to amyloid. And these, of course, haven't shown any benefit in terms of clinical changes yet, as I showed at the very beginning. But they keep pushing it earlier. Well, again, when you recognize that this is actually all about addressing insults, you realize that you want to address the insults, not just get rid of the amyloid. I think in the long run, getting rid of the amyloid after you've gotten rid of all the things pushing it is going to be a good idea. But in this case, Bonnie has been on the A4 clinical trial for 7 years, 2.5 years in the open label phase, spent this week listening to AAIC presentations online. So this is the ongoing Alzheimer's Association, which is, so all of the supporters are drug companies. And so unfortunately, no positive results to report in terms of reversing cognitive decline. She's saying, how does ReCODE compare or contrast to the many trials of modifiable risk factors? So a couple of ways. Of course, the modifiable risk factors you were just hearing about from Julie, but what we're doing, the basis of ReCODE is to ask what's driving the decline. We're not just saying, let's just start exercising someone. We're saying, what's causing your decline? And let me give you an example from Julie herself. As she has written about in the first survivors of Alzheimer's, written about beautifully, she had this tremendous improvement. And then after several years, she actually had a little bit of a slide. And so we wanted to look at what is driving that. And I know, Julie, you saw a few doctors who didn't find the problem, but clearly something was driving that change. And ultimately, it turned out to be babesia, as she documented beautifully in the book. And she went to see Dr. Schweig, who's an expert in tick-borne illnesses and who's done a tremendous job for her. So that's the difference between just doing, quote, modifiable risk factors, where you're assuming, okay, if we do these things, maybe things will be okay, and saying, we're going to get to the bottom of what actually is driving your decline, and we're going to target those things. That is what has given the best and most sustainable results to date. And then Bonnie goes on to say, do you anticipate giving trial results at the next international conference? Yeah, I've thought about this. And of course, some of these conferences are really about drug treatments, but I think it's a good idea. And probably, next year's AAIC might be a good place to do that. Now, interestingly, we have written some of these up for various journals that are more interested in drug trials, and they are not interested in hearing about these results. And I'm grateful. Journal of Alzheimer's Disease has been an open-minded group with Professor George Perry as the leader. And he's been looking for many years at all the different pieces and contributed in his own laboratory to many of the drivers of cognitive decline in Alzheimer's disease. So we're grateful to them for helping progress. And then she says, have you received pushback from the medical community? Tremendous pushback from the medical community that's saying, well, we don't believe this and we want you to use a drug and so forth and so on. And even some kind of nasty comments on Twitter and things like that. And I don't know if you can go in to the website and see a very nice job that Julie did with addressing some of these issues. And I addressed some of them myself. I think, look, we're all interested in the same thing here, which is best outcomes. And unfortunately, in this field, at times, it's been more about incomes than outcomes. And of course, Biogen spent $28 billion to develop a drug that does not work. And so, we have to focus more on the outcomes. And if we just all do that, I think we'll do much, much better. And Julie, I don't know if you want to weigh in, or Christine, on the pushback that you've received.
It's just been very frustrating to see mainstream not adopt your successful approach more widely. To me, it seems to be so much more about turf protection. People are protecting their hypothesis or their grant or their need for tenure or whatever, and they're not putting patients' best interests first. We have an approach that works. We wish it were easier, but really over time, it does become pretty easy. and it's sustainable. And this should be the standard of care until we can do better. You know, I mean, and it really sickens me to see how much people have pushed back and that it's not more widely accepted.
Yeah, and precision medicine protocols are becoming more and more becoming the mainstream in medicine, certainly for cancer as an example. And I think, this will happen as we get better and better, and we should be able to make it simpler and simpler right. as we begin to understand for each person, what are the critical few drivers. As you can imagine, at the beginning, we wanted to address everything because this was a terminal illness 100% of the time. Sorry, Chris, I interrupted you here. Please go ahead.
I was just about to say my related frustration is why not try something that helps your whole health, right? Your whole being, your other risk factors for getting other types of diseases. So I don't understand that at all. But people want a lot of people want a pill. They want some very simple, I don't have to do anything, just do me,
That's understandable. And
it also has no negative side effects. So why don't people do it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And in the trial, we had some people who were on antihypertensives who were able to come off their antihypertensives, some who were on statins who were able to come off their statins, so simply don't need these medications because they are doing the right things. Their metabolism is better. And this is, again, very much in line with what Professor Rob Lustig from UCSF has shown over the years, that we are hurting ourselves with some of the things that we're ingesting. And then, of course, that includes exposure to toxins and all these things. All right, the next one here is from Virginia, who said, would Tai Chi work well for the mind-body area, learning specific moves as one is physically active? And Julie, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, Tai Chi is wonderful. Yeah. Tai Chi is especially great as we age. I think it's so beautiful when I see people in the park practicing in groups and classes. It's a wonderful form of exercise. Excellent mind-body.
Yeah. Next one here is from Dan. Any success with 40 hertz sound or EMP treatment? So glad you mentioned that, Dan. Some work actually at MIT was working at 40 hertz sound. 40 hertz seems to be kind of the best area. That seems to come up again, and that's Violite has a gamma product that is a 40 hertz product as well. And that does seem to be what seems to be most helpful, whether sound, whether light, etc. So yeah, good point. And I think that this is the way of the future. How much is it going to be better if you use laser? Professor Hedaya believes it will be, but we'll see. And the good news is all of these things are continuing to enhance and improve what we're using. Jennifer says, are you enrolling people in the larger clinical trial that will be starting? We will be within about 2 months. So we've been at work for almost a year now in planning stages. And again, I want to thank the absolutely fantastic physicians. So Dr. Ann Hathaway, this is going to be done at 6 sites, and Dr. Kat Toops, and Dr. Christine Burke, and Dr. Nate Bergman, and Dr. Craig Tanio, and Dr. David Hasse. So this will be in Nashville, Miami, Cleveland, Sacramento, East Bay, and Marin County, California. And so part of this, you would need to live within 1 hour of those sites because you need to come in. There's a lot that can be done by telemedicine, but some visits to those sites are very important. So please, either let us know so we can get you on a list or just follow up in about 2 months. We're at the late stages, just getting ready to submit to the IRB. And I expect that this is probably going to start something like late September or early October of this year. Let's see here. Next is from, let's see here. Here we go, from Helen. I've been seeing some articles about vitamin K. Yeah, and we certainly use vitamin K2, especially with the vitamin D, to make sure that you have appropriate calcification, not in your arteries, but actually in your bones instead. And of course, there's so much on vitamin D. And interestingly, there's a recent claim you don't want to get it too high. That can potentially be damaging. So we have to be careful getting it with some K2, important as well. And Julie, what do you like to see for best vitamin D levels in people you're working with?
Somewhere between 50 and 80.
Yeah.
Seems to be good. Yeah, I did read that paper that was warning against higher levels, and we're not seeing consistent evidence supporting that. So I'm going to follow that closely.
And of course, vitamin D has all sorts of effects on hundreds of genes. has impacts on carcinogenesis, has impacts on vascular disease, has, of course, effects on COVID-19 and immune ability to prevent COVID-19 and treat it. So all sorts of effects of vitamin D. What do you do if this type of diet, so Candace says, what do you do if this type of diet triggers IBS symptoms? And this is such a good point, because these are the sorts of things that, that workarounds are so critical for. And one of the things that comes up a lot is people just trying suddenly to take a bunch of MCT oil and having problems with that. And I just got an email from Mary Newport yesterday, who's writing a new book that's going to be coming out. So Christine, what do you do for people where you get people going and then they complain about IBS symptoms? And Julie, what do you
I don't know about IBS specifically, but I do know that MCT oil should be done gradually and slowly, because you'll pay for it on both ends if you go too fast, or a lot of people experience that anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. In terms of IBS, I think we're learning that a lot of that really is food sensitivities. And when we have you start the program, we ask you to give up 4 foods. And interestingly, when people do that, a lot of the IBS goes away. So we ask you to give up all sugar. Yeah. We ask you to give up conventional dairy. We ask you to give up simple carbs. And we ask you to give up all grains. And it's amazing to see when people give up those foods before they start our protocol, a lot of the GI symptoms do go away. But as you know, in functional medicine, health is foundational to everything. So please work with a good functional practitioner to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And then Mary says, what, if anything, can be done to help a senior who experienced a traumatic brain injury decades ago and now has memory issues? So the first thing I would say is, if anyone's had a traumatic brain injury, please get on prevention or early reversal. Don't wait. But secondly, if you have waited, if there are now some memory issues, of course, Mary, you're not telling us how significant these are, how severe. But of course, this person has what we would call type 5. It has some traumatic contributor to this, whether it's Alzheimer's, I can't tell from what you've said here, but certainly has some traumatic contributor here. So absolutely I would get on the various ReCODE pieces to optimize what is there. And again, I don't know how severe, if this person has been in a coma or if this person has mild memory issues, I don't know. But please get evaluated. I don't know if you've already seen a neurologist or someone who can help. Certainly even go back to a nice paper that was published by Dr. Daniel Amen several years ago, showing he treated a number of people who had played football and had significant brain trauma and had developed CTE and was able to get some very nice turnarounds with using a protocol very similar to what we use in ReCODE. So yes, please get this person evaluated, please get them on treatment, and you may find that they do much better than they are doing currently. Next one here is from Jan, who says, I scored well above average on the test, but I struggle with memory issues. I did well on the short time 15-minute test, but struggle reading a book and remembering the story or telling others while I read and want to tell people. Is that hippocampal problems? Any idea? So great point. And I hear this fairly frequently, often from people who are very smart. So they have fallen somewhat, but they're still able to score very well on given cognitive tests. And Jan, maybe you're one of these people. This has actually happened to an old friend of mine, very smart guy, clearly has issues and we can see on his metabolic screen what's causing them. And yet he's able to score very, very well. Because you have to remember, we're looking at, where things came from, not just as where they are now. You might have started, way up here, and so you're still scoring very well. But for you, that's not what it might have been before. Now, as far as remembering long-term things, it depends on what's failing here. It can, in some people, it is actually because of attention. And so, this is essentially what people use things like Adderall for, but we can do much better than that. Adderall is not good for your brain. For other people, you mentioned here the short-term memory. And yes, this is related to what people call Korsakoff syndrome, where you do remember things for a few minutes, but then you lose it. So that is, you're not able to keep that memory. You're not able to consolidate the memory. This can be from poor sleep. So good idea. check your Oura ring, see how much slow wave sleep you're having and how much REM sleep you're having. And then also I would get further along with the evaluation. And so, yes, this may end up being hippocampal problems. You're not storing, you're not consolidating the memory that you begin with. Although, as you say, you can do well for just a very short period of time. Samira says, I'm following the protocol in KetoFlex 12.3, but I'm thin and small. Such a good point. And Samira, thank you so much for bringing this up. Let me come back to the science. This disease we call Alzheimer's is a network insufficiency. You're not able, the supply is not reaching the demand. So with people who are overweight, who have some extra adipose and are making lots of insulin, they're actually easier to turn around because they're able to make lots of insulin. You can support your brain. Now we just need to get them some ketones. But people who are frail, who are thinner, it's harder. We still want to get them ketones. For you, please take some exogenous ketones. Take ketone salts or ketone esters or something like that, and then slowly ease. And then you can also, once a week or twice a week, you can cycle out. And Julie, I know you've dealt with a lot of people and talked about this in the book as well. What do you suggest to people who are on the lower side of the BMI? We often see people 17, 18, 19 with their BMI, and then that they don't want to lose more weight. And in fact, they can actually do worse with their cognition. And you can see why, because now their network is even less sufficient.
Right. So it's a relatively common problem. KetoFlex 12.3 isn't a weight loss diet, but for some people it ends up leading to weight loss. When that occurs, very often it's because they've given up the foods we ask them to give up, but they're not adding enough healthy fat back in to make up that caloric shortfall. So they end up being hypocaloric without even realizing it. If you're doing lots of vegetables and just, small amounts of protein and not doing lots of extra healthy fat like avocados and nuts and seeds and high polyphenol extra virgin olive oil, all that can help you gain weight, also help you get into ketosis. So that's one place to start. And the other thing is, if you're metabolically healthy, why not add more resistant starches, like once a week or so, sweet potatoes and legumes and things like that. So that's another thing that you can experiment with.
And this is another reason that health coaches are so important, to get you to deal with these things and to help you make those changes, get the right things done. These are all critical. And I know the hour is getting late here, so we're going to take one more and then we'll have to follow up with the other ones in writing. But this last one, very important. These are such good questions. So thank you very much for the excellent questions. Bonnie is saying, is staying in ketosis still necessary for all patients, even those who are pre-symptomatic but ApoE44? And so this is something that comes up a lot. If you're just on prevention and you have no symptoms and you're scoring well, do you really need to get into ketosis? Well, here's the problem, though. Here's the issue. Your brain uses one of two things. It can go back and forth between glucose and ketones. And so when you're metabolically flexible, you get to do both of those. As we get a little older, we tend to lose both of them. So when we see people with cognitive decline, that is an emergency to me. That's telling me I'm not able to get enough support to my brain. You lose the glucose because of the insulin resistance. So you're not able to use that. And that's exactly what the PET scan shows. That's the signature of PET scan for pre-Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's. On the other hand, you're not able to make and use ketones. You're not ketone adapted either. So we need to make you insulin sensitive, but we also need to make you keto adapted. So now, if you're just going for prevention and you're not at high risk, you can do an occasional ketosis. You still want to be able to make and burn ketones. Once you get symptoms and you're dealing with that, you really do want to be able to be in ketosis. But yes, you cycle out of it because you want to have this ability to go both, to be metabolically flexible. But you're with ApoE44, that is a very high risk group. There are 7 million Americans who are ApoE44. Most don't know it. And the reality is none of them should be getting cognitive decline if they're doing the right things, if they're getting on the right prevention or earliest reversals. So for you, Bonnie, yeah, I would recommend cycle in and out of ketosis. Make sure of those two things. Make sure you're insulin sensitive. make sure you are keto adapted so you can do both. But sure, cycle out of it. And Julie and Christine, what do you recommend for someone like Bonnie?
I beautifully agree with everything that you said. Our ultimate goal isn't to be in ketosis 24/7 unless
Right.
that's necessary for cognition. Our ultimate goal is metabolic flexibility. We want to optimize the fuel supply to the brain. So I cycle in and out of ketosis every day.
Yes.
And our goal for people like yourself, Bonnie, is just to reach endogenous ketosis once every day. And I do that with a long daily fast. So you don't need to be in ketosis all the time, but your body needs to be able to be keto adapted and be able to get into ketosis. So once a day, get into ketosis, and you can burn glucose, you can burn fat, you're getting optimal fuel to your brain.
Yeah, fantastic. And Christine, anything else that you want to say to Bonnie?
Oops, you're muted, Chris.
Oh, I think you're muted. There we go.
I was answering some questions.
Okay,
So no, I don't, because I had checked out a little bit, and I think I got the gist of it, and you guys covered it.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you very much, Christine. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Christine. Thank you to everyone for the excellent questions. We will follow up on the rest of these. I think so many very helpful questions. And again, just to finish up with Bonnie's question, think about this as a hybrid. So, and when you're having cognitive decline, you've lost both. You have no gas and you have no charge. So we want to bring both of those back. And that's why there's a little bit of a paradox there. You're going to get more insulin sensitive when you do some fasting, but you have to be careful. The fasting, of course, can make things worse because you're now creating more of an insufficiency. So you've got to make sure that you get support. So again, thanks to everyone. We're very excited about the results from the trial. We're very excited about the upcoming trial. And we appreciate everything that people are giving us for feedback and follow-up, because we're continuing to make this better and better. Please, let's all work together. Let's make sure that we reduce the global burden of dementia, and we'll see everyone next time.